All right, Congressman Austin Scott, we want to start right here by time stamping this conversation. It is Wednesday afternoon at about 2:30. We want to do that because this is a situation that continues to evolve.
Sure, that's right.
Congressman, thanks first off for making the time to talk with us today. We appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So let's jump right in here. We're now on day 15, I believe, of this federal shutdown. What are the impacts of this shutdown here in Georgia?
Sure. Well, you've seen where the president is going to go ahead and pay the troops today, and so obviously he's trying to stop people who are using them as pawns from being able to use them as pawns. So I commend him for doing that. Remember, we have 9 military installations in the state of Georgia. So if you represent one of those communities or you're in one of those communities, the impact there from losing that payroll is huge. I mean, your restaurants, stores, the families that are wondering if they're going to have a paycheck or not. Obviously, not everybody at the bases is continuing to get paid. There are some who are furloughed. Those are families that are not going to get a paycheck until the government opens back up. And the thing that I want the citizens to know that are watching this is the legislation that the House sent to the Senate 3 weeks ago now, a little better than 3 weeks ago now, it's just a straight, clean, continuing resolution. It funded the government for 8 weeks with no shutdown, no increase in spending other than for security, which was mutually agreed to, no cut in spending in any other area. And the purpose of the 8 weeks was to give us the opportunity to continue to negotiate a longer term budget. And unfortunately, Senate Democrats have rejected that. And so we're going into the 3rd week of the shutdown. And you are starting to see the impact. I mean, farmers can't get the loans processed. First call I got yesterday was from somebody that was trying to sell a piece of property. It was a USDA loan. It can't get done until the government opens back up. So you are going to start seeing the economic impacts on the economy.
Let me ask you a question that I'm sure everybody who is watching is wondering, and probably front of their mind. What is the path? What is the path to reopening the government?
Yeah, it's a clean CR. No games, no gimmicks. That's what is in the Senate right now. It is. There are a lot of things that have been said about the demands that the Senate Democrats have to vote to open the government again. There's a demand for an increase of 1.5 trillion in spending. Again, this is an 8-week continuing resolution to keep the government funded while we negotiate a longer-term budget. We're obviously not going to agree to a $1.5 trillion increase in spending when we're running a deficit today. And let me say this, with regard to the subsidies that there's so much concern about, the average subsidy for the state of Georgia, for a citizen of the state of Georgia that is receiving the subsidy, the enhanced subsidy, is $44 a month. So when they're out there saying that everybody's, insurance premiums are going to double and people are going to be forced out of their coverage, the average subsidy, and the 1.24 million Georgians that receive that subsidy, the average subsidy is $44 a month.
You raised the issue of the ACA subsidies, the Affordable Care Act subsidies, also known as Obamacare, and that has been the real sticking point in this conversation. I want to dwell on that a little bit because that is a topic that I think a lot of our audience has come to hear a lot about, and it's worth unpacking here. Let's start with this. The Democrats' main negotiating point and main sticking point has been that they want to see an extension of those ACA subsidies in any new spending bill. Republicans like yourself have said that the CR that the House passed, that's the path forward. There's a bit of a gridlock on this. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Do you have some obligation to work towards a compromise since you control all the levers of government here?
So we have compromised with them. These subsidies were supposed to end at the end of 2022. We are now approaching the end of 2025. And so they actually wrote the language when they had the House, the Senate, and the White House where the subsidies would expire at the end of 2025. And they have rejected just keeping the government open for two months without any changes or policy writers or anything else in the continuing resolution. Now, the Democrats want you to think it's about that. The total 10-year cost of that is about $350 billion. That is the total 10-year cost of that. The Democrats are demanding $1.5 trillion in additional spending. So they're demanding 1.2 trillion in additional spending over and above the health insurance subsidies. So the Democrats are not being honest when they say it's about the health insurance subsidy. When that $350 billion, it's a huge price tag, but that's only about 20% of what the Democrats are demanding. Again, simply to open the government up for a few weeks so that we can negotiate a longer term budget. And what I want you to know, for the state of Georgia, the average subsidy that they've shut the government down over is $44 a month.
In fairness, Congressman, the KFF study that I'm sure you've seen that
right.
has been kind of in the ecosystem now suggested
right.
that some people could see premiums increase more than 100% if these subsidies are not extended. Do you
Right.
dispute that?
And so KFF is a great source for information. I agree with you. I have read their stuff. So in some cases, you're talking about a $500 annual premium to a $1,000 annual premium if the person doesn't change plans. But the reason we as Republicans believe there's so much fraud in these plans and in the people that have been enrolled onto the subsidies is that over 40% of these contracts never had a claim last year. Not a single prescription, not a flu shot, not a doctor's visit. There are 4 people in my home. All 4 of us have claims on a regular basis. And so we do believe that there's fraud in the system. But when they are quoting things, keep this in mind with the KFF numbers. They are quoting an annual increase. We all pay our health insurance, at least most of us do, on a monthly basis. So when they're saying it's a $500 increase, people assume it's $500 a month. It's actually $44 a month is what the subsidy is on average for the state of Georgia for 2025.
Congressman, I want to ask you one last question on this point, and then I want to shift tacks slightly in the time that we have left here. But I think it's worth dwelling here for one moment longer, because you made a comment a moment ago. You said that you think that there is substantial fraud inside of this system. Can you prove that, or is that just a suspicion?
It is a suspicion because of how many of the contracts have never had a claim. And so if we're paying all of these subsidies, and again, this is your tax dollars that are being paid to an insurance company. These subsidies do not go to the individual insured person. They go to the insurance companies. And so we're sending these billions and billions of dollars to the insurance companies. And if there's never a claim on a contract, and you certainly hope there's not a big claim, a cancer claim or a heart attack claim or something, but you would expect that at some point in the year, the person would have a pharmacy claim with an antibiotic, a flu shot, a doctor's visit. So the reason we think there's fraud is because 40% of the contracts have had 0 claims. And when I say 0 claims, I mean not one single dollar.
Congressman, I want to raise something that I'm sure you've seen already. One of your Georgia colleagues, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, last week very vocally came out and said that the Republican-controlled House should be back in session and should be looking to address these health care issues that Democrats have raised. Do you support her position on that, or do you disagree?
I do not. I respect her. I disagree with her, though. Ultimately, with regard to budget negotiations, which again, I mean, we sent the Senate a continuing resolution so that we would have an additional 8 weeks to negotiate a longer-term budget. These numbers had been previously agreed to by at least 10 Democrats in the Senate, enough Democrats that we could pass the bill by getting to the 60-vote threshold. And again, while we technically control the Senate, we don't control the 60 votes that it takes to get the legislation to the floor. But I disagree with her on this one. I respect her, but I do not agree with her on her strategy on this.
Congressman, I wonder if there might be some Georgians who look at this entire situation and they think about their own lives a little bit, and they think of when they have, because it impacts their lives, but it also has parallels to real life too. I wonder if there may be some Georgians who look at this and think, well, gee, in my personal life, when I have a bill due, I've got to make some decisions. And maybe me and my spouse, me and my partner, we disagree on some things, but we've got to get together by the deadline and reach a deal, because if we don't pay the bill, there's going to be consequences for us. And I wonder if those voters may look at the situation in Congress and think, well, boy, they're missing these deadlines. To somebody who might be thinking that, what would you say to them? Who would you say is responsible?
No, I think they're right. And I'll tell you, I mean, I think one of the challenges here is there's so little that's actually known about what the demands are to reopen the government. If we as Republicans had passed anything other than a clean continuing resolution that simply funded the government at current levels for 8 weeks so that we could negotiate a longer term budget, then I think that those of us in the House Republican conference might have some blame. But that's not what we did. We did a clean continuing resolution. There's no social language in the bill. There's no reductions in spending in the bill. It is a clean continuing resolution for 8 weeks so that we can negotiate a longer term budget. And now the Dems have demanded $1.5 trillion in spending. And so the Democrats are real quick to go to and say, well, we want the insurance subsidy. Well, the insurance subsidy is about 20% of what their demands are. They have another 1.2 trillion in demands in increased deficit spending simply to open the government up for 8 weeks. We're not going to give in to that. We're not going to give in to that. And as the public begins to understand that the subsidy is $44 a month, not $500 a month, then I think that there's going to become a lot of frustration over the misrepresentation of how much the subsidy actually was.
Congressman, we always want to be respectful of your time. We're closing in on our end of time slot here. I want to ask you this last question. It's one that we've asked a lot of members of the Georgia delegation, Republican and Democrat. I want to make sure we ask you this as well. Republicans and Democrats still seem a long ways apart on this. Are you willing to negotiate on anything outside of what the clean CR, as you would describe it, currently sets as its terms?
Not until the government reopens. The government has to reopen. I mean, you don't get to take hostages the way Chuck Schumer has. And to be candid, Chuck Schumer has been taken hostage by the far left of his party and concerned about his primary and his leadership position. So again, straight up continuing resolution is what we sent them for 8 weeks to get us 8 weeks to negotiate a longer term budget. These are numbers that Schumer had agreed to in the past, and now all of a sudden they've changed their demands to increase spending about $1.5 trillion, and that's just a non-starter.
Congressman Austin Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you.